The little girl sat on the concrete barrier, her small legs dangling over the edge where the busy highway traffic rushed past just feet below. Her blonde hair whipped in the wind created by passing trucks and cars. Tears streaked down her dirty face. She wore what had once been a pretty blue dress, now torn at the hem and stained with mud. One of her white shoes was missing. The sun was setting fast and soon it would be dark. She was maybe 7 years old, completely alone and clearly terrified. Brielle Thompson had just finished her shift at the diner and was walking to catch the bus when she spotted the child. Her heart jumped into her throat. The girl was perched in such a dangerous spot. One wrong move, one strong gust of wind, and she could fall backward into traffic moving at 60 miles per hour. "Hey there, sweetheart," Brielle called out softly, keeping her voice calm even though panic flooded through her. She walked slowly toward the child, not wanting to startle her. "My name is Brielle. Can you tell me your name?" The little girl looked up with wide, frightened eyes. She didn't answer but her bottom lip trembled. "You're in a really dangerous spot right there," Brielle continued, taking another careful step closer. "How about you come down from there and we can talk? I bet you're hungry. I have some crackers in my bag." The girl's eyes darted to Brielle's purse, then back to her face. She seemed to be weighing whether to trust the stranger. "I promise I'm safe," Brielle said, extending her hand. "I'm a mama too. I have a son named Brandon who's 8 years old. He's probably at home right now doing his homework and wondering where I am." Something in Brielle's voice must have reached through the child's fear. She slowly climbed down from the barrier and took Brielle's hand. Her small fingers were ice cold despite the warm evening. Up close, Brielle could see the child had been crying for a long time. Her eyes were red and swollen. There was a small cut on her knee that had bled down her leg. "What's your name, baby?" Brielle asked gently, kneeling down to the girl's level. "Sophie," the child whispered. Her voice was hoarse, probably from crying. "That's a beautiful name. Sophie, where are your parents? Are they nearby?" Sophie's face crumpled and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't want to go back. Please don't make me go back." Brielle's stomach tightened. Those words, spoken with such desperation, set off every alarm bell in her mind. She had worked with enough troubled families through her church volunteer work to know that sometimes children ran away for very serious reasons. Okay, Brielle soothed, pulling the child into a gentle hug. Sophie collapsed against her, sobbing. "Nobody's going to make you do anything you don't want to do. Let's just get you somewhere safe first, all right? You're cold and you're hurt and it's getting dark." Sophie nodded against Brielle's shoulder. Brielle knew she should probably call the police right away. That was the logical thing to do. But something in her gut told her to wait, to hear this child's story first. What if Sophie was running from abuse? What if calling authorities would put her right back into danger? She made a decision that would change everything. "How about you come home with me tonight?" Brielle offered. "You can meet Brandon, get cleaned up, have something to eat. We can figure out what to do next when you feel safer. Does that sound okay?" Sophie pulled back and looked up at Brielle with those tear-filled eyes. After a moment she nodded. Brielle took off her cardigan sweater, the red one she wore over her diner uniform, and wrapped it around Sophie's shoulders. Then she picked up the little girl, who was clearly exhausted, and carried her toward the bus stop. During the 20-minute bus ride to Brielle's neighborhood, Sophie stayed quiet. She kept her face pressed against Brielle's shoulder, occasionally shuddering with leftover sobs. Brielle rubbed small circles on her back, the way she did for Brandon when he was upset. Brielle's mind raced. She lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Money was always tight. She worked at the diner during the day and cleaned offices 3 nights a week to make rent and keep Brandon fed and clothed. Taking in another child, even temporarily, would stretch her already thin resources. But looking down at Sophie's small, frightened face, Brielle knew she couldn't have made any other choice. This child needed help. She needed safety. She needed someone to choose her, at least for tonight. When they reached Brielle's apartment building, the elevator was broken again, so they climbed 4 flights of stairs. Sophie had fallen into an exhausted half-sleep against Brielle's shoulder, her small body heavy with fatigue. Brielle unlocked the door to apartment 4C and stepped inside. The living room was small but clean, with a worn couch and a television on a second-hand stand. Brandon's homework was spread across the coffee table. The smell of the casserole Brielle had put in the slow cooker that morning filled the air. "Brandon, honey, I'm home," Brielle called out. Her son appeared from the bedroom, his textbook in hand. When he saw Sophie in his mother's arms, his eyes widened with curiosity. "Brandon, this is Sophie," Brielle explained. "She's going to stay with us tonight. She needs our help." Brandon, bless his heart, didn't ask a dozen questions like most 8-year-olds might. He had grown up watching his mother help people, whether it was bringing meals to sick neighbors or letting someone sleep on their couch when they had nowhere else to go. He understood that sometimes people needed kindness without explanation. "Hi Sophie," he said with a friendly smile. "Do you like macaroni? Mom made the good kind." Sophie lifted her head slightly from Brielle's shoulder and gave Brandon a tiny nod. Brielle carried Sophie into the bathroom and gently cleaned the cut on her knee, applied antibiotic ointment and put on a bandage. She found one of Brandon's old t-shirts for Sophie to sleep in and helped her wash her face and hands. At dinner, Sophie ate 3 helpings of casserole and 2 glasses of milk. She hadn't said more than a few words, but Brielle didn't push. The child needed time. After dinner, Brandon offered to share his room with Sophie for the night. Brielle set up a makeshift bed on the floor with extra blankets and pillows, making it as comfortable as possible. As she tucked Sophie in, the little girl grabbed Brielle's hand. "Thank you," Sophie whispered. "You're nice." "You're welcome, baby," Brielle replied, her heart aching for whatever this child had been through. "You're safe here. Get some sleep." That night, after both children were asleep, Brielle sat on her couch with a cup of tea and stared at the wall. What had she gotten herself into? She needed to find Sophie's family, or at least report her to the authorities. But every time she thought about making that call, she remembered the desperate way Sophie had begged not to go back. Tomorrow, Brielle decided. Tomorrow she would figure it out. Tonight, a scared little girl was sleeping safely under her roof, and that was enough. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between doing what seemed logical and doing what your heart told you was right? What would you do if you found a child in danger? Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to hear how this incredible story unfolds. Morning sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of Brielle's apartment. She woke up on the couch where she had dozed off, her neck stiff from the awkward position. The first thing she did was check on the children. Brandon was still asleep in his bed, but the makeshift bed on the floor was empty. Panic shot through her until she heard soft voices coming from the kitchen. Brielle walked in to find Sophie sitting at the small kitchen table, wearing Brandon's oversized t-shirt, her legs swinging as they dangled from the chair. Brandon was showing her his collection of small toy cars, explaining the difference between race cars and regular cars with the serious tone of an expert. "Good morning," Brielle said, relief flooding through her. "Morning, Mom," Brandon replied cheerfully. "Sophie likes the red car best. That's the fastest one." Sophie looked up at Brielle and offered a small smile. It was the first time Brielle had seen her smile, and it transformed her whole face. "How did you sleep, sweetheart?" Brielle asked. "Good," Sophie said quietly. Then after a pause she added, "Better than in a long time." That statement sent another pang through Brielle's heart. What kind of life had this child been living? Brielle made pancakes for breakfast, using the last of the mix in her pantry. She watched Sophie eat slowly, more relaxed than she had been the night before. The little girl was beautiful, with delicate features and those striking blue eyes. Her blonde hair, now cleaned and brushed, fell in soft waves to her shoulders. After breakfast, Brielle called in sick to the diner. She hated doing it because she needed the money, but she couldn't leave Sophie alone, and she certainly couldn't bring her to work. She sent Brandon to school with instructions to come straight home afterward. Once Brandon left, Brielle sat down with Sophie on the couch. "Sophie, honey, I need to ask you some questions," Brielle began gently. "I want to help you, but I need to understand what's going on. Can you tell me where you live?" Sophie's smile faded. She picked at a thread on the couch cushion. "In a big house. It's very big." "And who lives there with you?" "My daddy," Sophie said. "And Maggie. She's the housekeeper. And sometimes there's a nanny, but they keep changing." "What about your mommy?" Sophie's face went pale. "Daddy says she's gone to heaven. But that's not true." Brielle's breath caught. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I found letters," Sophie whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Letters that said she went away. She left us. She left me." "Oh, baby," Brielle said, pulling Sophie close. The child started crying again, the kind of heartbroken sobs that could only come from deep betrayal. "He lied to me," Sophie cried. "Daddy lied. He said she died, but she just didn't want me anymore." Brielle held Sophie while she cried, her own eyes filling with tears. She was starting to understand now. This wasn't a case of abuse in the traditional sense. This was a child whose world had been shattered by lies and abandonment. "How did you end up by the highway yesterday?" Brielle asked when Sophie's sobs had quieted to sniffles. "I ran away," Sophie admitted. "I was so mad at Daddy. I wanted to make him sorry. The nanny was on her phone, not paying attention. I just walked out the front door and kept walking. I walked for a really long time. Then I got lost and scared, but I didn't want to go back to that house where everyone lies. I understand, Brielle said softly. You felt betrayed by your daddy. Sophie nodded against Brielle's chest. But Sophie, I bet your daddy is very worried about you right now. He probably doesn't even know where you are. Good, Sophie said, but her voice lacked conviction. Let him worry. Brielle sighed. This situation was more complicated than she had thought. A child from a wealthy family, a father who had lied about the mother's death, and now Sophie was missing. The father was probably losing his mind with worry, even if he had made terrible mistakes. Can you tell me your daddy's name? Brielle asked. His full name. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, Julian Parker. Brielle's eyes widened. Julian Parker. Even she, who rarely paid attention to business news, knew that name. Julian Parker was the CEO of Parker Technologies, one of the biggest tech companies in the country. He was a billionaire. His face had been on magazine covers. She had seen him on the news occasionally. And his daughter was sitting on her couch, wearing her son's old t-shirt. Sophie, there are probably a lot of people looking for you right now, Brielle said carefully. Your daddy needs to know you're safe. I don't want to see him, Sophie said stubbornly. I don't want to go back to that house. I know you're hurt and angry, Brielle replied. And you have every right to feel that way. Your daddy made a big mistake by lying to you. But running away isn't the answer. You could have gotten really hurt yesterday. But you saved me, Sophie said, looking up at Brielle with those big blue eyes. Can't I just stay here with you and Brandon? I like it here. You're nice to me. You don't lie. Brielle's heart broke a little more. This child, who probably had everything money could buy, preferred Brielle's tiny apartment because someone here showed her genuine care. Oh, sweetheart, I would love to have you stay, Brielle said honestly. But your daddy loves you, I'm sure of it. And we need to at least let him know you're safe. He must be so scared. Sophie thought about this. Will you come with me? When I see him? Of course I will, Brielle promised. I'll be right there with you. Okay, Sophie agreed reluctantly. But not today. Please, can I stay one more day? Brielle knew she should probably contact Julian Parker immediately. But looking at Sophie's pleading face, she found herself nodding. One more day. But tomorrow we have to make this right. Sophie nodded and hugged Brielle tightly. Thank you, Miss Brielle. They spent the rest of the day together. Brielle let Sophie help her with simple chores around the apartment. They made cookies together, and Sophie laughed for the first time when flour ended up on both their faces. They watched a movie. They talked about school and friends and favorite foods. When Brandon came home, he was delighted to find Sophie still there. The two children played together while Brielle made dinner. She watched them from the kitchen, her heart full despite her worries. Sophie was coming out of her shell, smiling more, acting like a regular 7-year-old. That evening, after the children were in bed, Brielle sat with her laptop and searched for news about Sophie Parker. What she found made her stomach sink. There were dozens of articles. Billionaire's daughter missing for 3 days. Massive search underway for Sophie Parker. Julian Parker offers $1 million reward for information. The most recent article from that very afternoon showed a photo of Julian Parker at a press conference. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face haggard. He was begging for anyone with information to come forward. Sophie, if you can hear this, please know that Daddy loves you so much, he had said to the cameras. I'm sorry for everything. Please come home. Or just let someone know you're safe. I just need to know you're okay. Brielle closed her laptop and put her face in her hands. This man was suffering. Whatever mistakes he had made, he clearly loved his daughter desperately. She couldn't keep Sophie from him any longer, even for one more day. Tomorrow morning, she decided. Tomorrow morning she would call Julian Parker and tell him his daughter was safe. As if sensing Brielle's thoughts, a small voice came from the doorway. Miss Brielle? Sophie stood there in her borrowed pajamas, her hair mussed from trying to sleep. Can't sleep, baby? Brielle asked. Sophie shook her head and climbed onto the couch next to Brielle. I was thinking about my daddy. What were you thinking? That maybe he's sad right now, Sophie admitted. Even if I'm mad at him, I don't want him to be sad. Brielle pulled Sophie close. That shows you have a kind heart, sweetheart. Do you think he really loves me? Sophie asked. Or did he lie about that too? I think your daddy loves you more than anything in the world, Brielle said with certainty. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes because they're trying to protect the people they love. They don't always make the right choice, but that doesn't mean the love isn't real. Sophie was quiet, processing this. Then she said, "Okay. Tomorrow we can call him. But you have to promise to stay with me." "I promise," Brielle said. "I'll be right there with you through all of it." That night, Sophie slept in Brielle's bed, curled up against her side. Brielle stayed awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and praying she was doing the right thing. This little girl had stumbled into her life, and in just 2 days, Brielle had grown to care for her deeply. Tomorrow everything would change. Julian Parker would come to get his daughter. And Brielle would go back to her regular life, her small apartment, her 2 jobs. She would probably never see Sophie again. The thought made her sadder than she wanted to admit. Sunday morning arrived with rain pattering against the windows. Brielle woke early, Sophie still asleep beside her. She carefully slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Her hands shook slightly as she poured the water. Today she would call Julian Parker. Today she would give Sophie back to her father. But when she returned to the bedroom, Sophie was sitting up, looking small and scared again. "I changed my mind," Sophie blurted out. "I don't want to call him yet. I'm not ready." Brielle sat on the edge of the bed. "Sophie, sweetheart, your daddy needs to know you're safe. He's probably not sleeping, not eating, just worrying about you." "Just one more day," Sophie pleaded. "Please, Miss Brielle. I'll be ready tomorrow, I promise. I just need one more day to be brave." Brielle looked into those anxious blue eyes and felt her resolve crumble. One more day wouldn't hurt, would it? One more day to help this child feel secure before facing her father. "All right," Brielle agreed, even though her conscience nagged at her. "One more day. But Sophie, tomorrow we absolutely must call him. No more delays. Promise?" "I promise," Sophie said, relief flooding her face. They spent Sunday as a quiet day at home. The rain kept them inside, which was fine with Brielle. She couldn't afford to take the kids anywhere anyway. They played board games that Brielle had picked up at garage sales. Brandon taught Sophie how to play checkers, and Sophie's delighted laughter when she won a game filled the small apartment with warmth. Brielle made grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch, cutting them into triangles the way Brandon liked. Sophie ate hers slowly, savoring each bite. "This is the best grilled cheese I ever had," Sophie declared. Brandon grinned. "Mom makes everything taste good. Even vegetables." "That's because I put love in it," Brielle said, ruffling Brandon's hair. Sophie watched this interaction with a wistful expression. "My daddy doesn't cook. The housekeeper makes my food or we order from restaurants." "What kinds of things do you like to do with your daddy?" Brielle asked, trying to steer the conversation toward positive memories. Sophie's face fell. "We don't really do stuff together. He's always at his office or on his phone. On weekends he usually works in his home office. Sometimes he comes to say goodnight before I go to bed, but sometimes he forgets." Brielle's heart ached. This child lived in a mansion, probably had every toy imaginable, but she was starving for her father's attention and time. "I'm sure he wishes he could spend more time with you," Brielle offered. "Running a big company is probably very demanding." "That's what the nannies always say," Sophie replied. "But other kids' dads and moms come to school events and play with them. My daddy hasn't come to anything at my school since." She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. "Since before Mommy left." Brielle pulled Sophie into a hug. "Oh baby, I'm so sorry." "Why did she leave me?" Sophie asked, her voice breaking. "Wasn't I good enough? Did I do something wrong?" "No, no, no," Brielle said firmly, holding Sophie's face in her hands so the little girl had to look at her. "Listen to me, Sophie. Whatever happened with your mommy, it was not your fault. You hear me? Sometimes adults make choices that have nothing to do with their children. Your mommy's leaving was about her own problems, not about you. But if I was better, maybe she would have stayed," Sophie insisted. "That's not how it works, sweetheart. You are perfect just the way you are. Any mother would be lucky to have you as a daughter." Sophie sniffled. "Would you?" The question hit Brielle right in the chest. "Oh Sophie, absolutely. In a heartbeat." They sat together on the couch for a long time, Sophie curled against Brielle's side, finding comfort in her presence. Brandon, sensing his mom and Sophie needed some quiet time, played with his cars on the floor nearby, occasionally glancing over with concern. Later that afternoon, Brielle decided to do something special. She gathered the few craft supplies she kept in a drawer and brought them to the coffee table. "How about we make some artwork?" she suggested. The children eagerly agreed. They spent the next hour creating pictures with markers, crayons, and construction paper. Sophie drew a picture of 4 stick figures holding hands. She labeled them, Miss Brielle, Brandon, Sophie, and Daddy. That's beautiful, Brielle said, studying the drawing. Is that what you hope for? For your daddy to be part of things? Sophie nodded. I want him to be like he used to be. Before Mommy left, he smiled more. He played games with me. He read me stories every night. After she was gone, he just got sad and busy all the time. Brielle was beginning to understand the full picture now. Julian Parker hadn't just lied about his wife's death, he had also checked out emotionally, leaving his daughter to grieve and process everything alone. No wonder Sophie had run away. Your daddy is probably dealing with his own hurt, Brielle explained gently. When grown-ups get their hearts broken, sometimes they don't know how to handle it. They shut down or throw themselves into work. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. I just want him to see me again, Sophie whispered. Really see me, not just walk past my room on the way to his office. Then that's what you need to tell him, Brielle said. When we call him tomorrow, you can tell him exactly how you feel. And I think he'll listen. I really do. That evening, Brielle made spaghetti for dinner. It was cheap and filling and the kids loved it. They ate together at the small table, Sophie chattering about the games they had played and the pictures they had made. She seemed happier, more settled. After dinner, Brielle found an old movie on TV, one of those animated ones about talking animals. The three of them cuddled on the couch under a blanket, watching the movie together. Sophie fell asleep halfway through, her head resting on Brielle's lap. Brandon looked at his mother and whispered, Is Sophie going to live with us now? Brielle stroked Sophie's hair gently. No, baby. Tomorrow we have to help her go back to her family. But she's sad there, Brandon protested. She's happy here. I know, Brielle said softly. But sometimes the right thing to do is hard. Sophie's daddy loves her and needs her home. We've helped her feel safe and brave enough to face him again. That's the best thing we can do for her. I'm going to miss her, Brandon admitted. Me too, Brielle agreed, her voice thick with emotion. When the movie ended, Brielle carried Sophie to bed and tucked her in. She stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the little girl sleep peacefully. In just 3 days, this child had worked her way into Brielle's heart. Tomorrow would be hard for all of them. But it was time. Time for Sophie to go home, time for her father to step up and be the parent she needed, time for their family to heal. Brielle returned to the living room where Brandon was gathering his homework for school the next day. Mom, he said seriously, you did a good thing helping Sophie. Brielle smiled at her wise young son. We did a good thing, honey. You made her feel welcome and safe too. Maybe we'll see her again sometime, Brandon said hopefully. Maybe, Brielle replied, though she doubted it. People like Julian Parker didn't stay connected with people like her. Their worlds were too different. That night, Brielle lay in bed thinking about what would happen tomorrow. She would call Julian Parker's office first thing in the morning. He would come to get Sophie. There would probably be police involved, questions asked, maybe even trouble for Brielle for not reporting Sophie's whereabouts immediately. But it would be worth it if Sophie and her father could repair their relationship. That was what mattered most. Brielle finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that the next day would bring more than just a reunion between father and daughter. It would bring changes she could never have imagined, changes that would alter the course of her life forever. Monday morning came too quickly. Brielle woke to find Sophie already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed and staring at her hands. Good morning, sweetheart, Brielle said gently. Are you ready? Sophie nodded slowly, though she looked terrified. Will you really stay with me when he comes? Absolutely, Brielle promised. I'll be right there. After getting both children dressed and fed breakfast, Brielle sent Brandon off to school with an extra tight hug. Then she sat down with her old cell phone and pulled up the search she had done days earlier. She found the main number for Parker Technologies. Sophie sat close beside her on the couch, gripping Brielle's free hand tightly. Brielle dialed the number, her heart pounding. A receptionist answered professionally. Parker Technologies, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with Julian Parker, Brielle said. It's about his daughter. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. One moment, please. Don't hang up. The line went to music for only seconds before a man's voice came on, urgent and hoarse. This is Julian Parker. Do you have information about Sophie? Is she safe? Please tell me she's okay. The desperation in his voice made Brielle's throat tighten. Mr. Parker, my name is Brielle Thompson. Sophie is safe. She's with me. She's been with me for the past 4 days. There was a sound like a sob on the other end of the line. She's safe? She's really safe? Can I talk to her? Please, let me talk to my daughter. Brielle looked at Sophie, who nodded hesitantly. She handed the phone to the little girl. Daddy? Sophie said quietly. Through the phone, Brielle could hear Julian's voice crack. Sophie, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you hurt? Did anyone hurt you? No, Sophie replied. Miss Brielle found me. She's been taking care of me. Thank God, Julian breathed. Thank God you're safe. Sophie, I need to see you. Where are you? I'll come right now. Sophie looked at Brielle for reassurance. Brielle took the phone back. Mr. Parker, I'll text you my address. But I need to tell you something first. Sophie is scared to see you. She's hurt and confused about some things that have happened in her life. When you come here, you need to be ready to really listen to her. Can you do that? Yes, Julian said immediately. Whatever she needs. I'll do anything. Just please, let me come get my daughter. Brielle gave him the address and hung up. She sent a text with the apartment number to make sure he found the right place. He'll be here soon, Brielle told Sophie. How are you feeling? Scared, Sophie admitted. What if he's mad at me for running away? I don't think he's going to be mad, Brielle assured her. I think he's going to be so relieved to see you that nothing else will matter. They didn't have to wait long. 25 minutes later, there was a firm knock on the door. Brielle looked through the peephole and saw a tall man in an expensive dark blue suit, his brown hair slightly disheveled. Even through the peephole, she could see the anxiety on his face. She opened the door. Julian Parker looked like he had aged years in just 4 days. His eyes were bloodshot and had dark circles under them. His usually clean-shaven face had stubble. His suit was wrinkled. But when his eyes fell on Sophie, who stood behind Brielle, his whole face transformed. Sophie, he breathed. Before anyone could say anything else, he dropped to his knees right there in the doorway. Tears were streaming down his face. Sophie, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Sophie hesitated, then slowly walked toward him. When she was close enough, Julian pulled her into his arms and held her like he would never let go. He was crying openly, his shoulders shaking. I thought I'd lost you forever, he said into her hair. I thought something terrible had happened to you. Sophie, I love you so much. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry I lied to you. I'm sorry I haven't been there. I'm sorry for all of it. Sophie started crying too, clinging to her father. Why did you lie about Mommy? Why did you tell me she was dead? Julian pulled back just enough to look at his daughter's face. Because I was a coward. Your mom left you, and I couldn't stand the thought of you knowing that. I thought if you believed she had died, it would hurt less than knowing she chose to leave. But I was wrong. I should have told you the truth. I should have helped you deal with it instead of pretending it didn't happen. It hurt so much when I found out, Sophie sobbed. The letter said she didn't want to be a mom anymore. She didn't want me anymore. Oh baby, no, Julian said, his voice breaking. That had nothing to do with you. Your mother had her own problems, her own issues. She made a terrible choice, but it wasn't because of anything you did or didn't do. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The absolute best thing. They held each other for a long time, both crying. Brielle stood to the side, tears streaming down her own face as she watched this reunion. Whatever mistakes Julian had made, his love for his daughter was undeniable. Finally, Julian seemed to remember where he was. He looked up at Brielle, still kneeling on the floor with his arms around Sophie. You must be Brielle, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you. Thank you for keeping her safe. Thank you for taking care of her when I couldn't. I don't even know how to express how grateful I am. You don't need to thank me, Brielle said softly. Anyone would have done the same. That's not true, Julian replied. You took in a stranger's child, kept her safe, and helped her feel secure enough to come back to me. That's extraordinary. He stood up, keeping one hand on Sophie's shoulder as if afraid to let her go. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Please let me give you a reward, he said. The reward I offered was $1 million, but honestly, I give you everything I have. You gave me back my daughter. Brielle shook her head. I don't want your money, Mr. Parker. I didn't help Sophie for a reward. I helped her because she needed help. But you must have expenses, Julian insisted. Taking care of Sophie for 4 days, missing work, the food, everything. Please at least let me reimburse you for that. It's not necessary, Brielle started to say. Sophie tugged on her father's sleeve. Daddy, Miss Brielle is really nice. She made me feel safe. She and Brandon shared everything with me even though they don't have a lot. She called in sick to work to stay with me. You should help her because she helped us. Julian looked at his daughter with surprise, then back at Brielle. Sophie's right. Please let me do something. What can I do? Brielle hesitated. She had bills that were overdue. Her car needed repairs. Brandon needed new shoes. But accepting money from this billionaire felt wrong somehow, like she had helped Sophie for the wrong reasons. I really don't need anything, she said firmly. Julian studied her for a moment, seeming to understand her pride. Then maybe we can talk about this another time. But I'm not going to forget what you did for us. For Sophie, for me, for our family. Sophie suddenly turned and hugged Brielle tightly. Thank you, Miss Brielle. I love you. Brielle's eyes filled with fresh tears. She hugged the little girl back. I love you too, sweetheart. You be brave now, okay? Talk to your daddy. Tell him what you need. And remember that you're special and loved. I will, Sophie promised. As Julian led Sophie toward the door, the little girl looked back at Brielle one more time. Can I come visit you sometime? If your daddy says it's okay, you're always welcome here, Brielle replied. Julian nodded. We'll arrange something. I promise. And then they were gone. The door closed and Brielle was alone in her apartment once again. She sank onto the couch, emotionally exhausted. The apartment felt too quiet, too empty without Sophie's presence. She had done the right thing, she told herself. Sophie was back with her father. They would work through their issues. Everything would be okay. But as Brielle looked at the picture Sophie had drawn, still on the coffee table, showing the 4 stick figures holding hands, she felt a deep sadness. She had grown attached to that little girl. And now she would probably never see her again. That night, when Brandon came home from school, he immediately noticed Sophie's absence. She went back to her daddy? He asked. Yes, Brielle confirmed. They're going to work things out. Brandon nodded, looking sad but understanding. That's good, I guess. I hope she's happy. Me too, baby, Brielle said. Me too. She didn't expect to ever hear from Julian Parker again. Rich people lived in a different world. They didn't stay in touch with people from neighborhoods like hers. But she was wrong. 2 days later, on Wednesday evening, there was a knock on her door. When Brielle opened it, she found Julian Parker standing there again. This time he wasn't crying or panicked. He was composed, though he still looked tired. Mr. Parker, Brielle said in surprise. Is everything okay? Is Sophie all right? Sophie is fine, he assured her quickly. She's with a therapist right now, actually. We started counseling together. She's already doing better. I'm glad to hear that, Brielle said sincerely. Can I come in? Julian asked. I need to talk to you about something important. Brielle stepped aside to let Julian into her apartment. He looked around briefly, taking in the modest space, but his expression held no judgment, only thoughtfulness. Please sit down, Brielle offered, gesturing to the couch. Julian sat, and Brielle settled into the armchair across from him. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together, clearly working up to saying something significant. I've been thinking a lot over the past 2 days, Julian began. About Sophie, about myself, about what kind of father I've been. The therapist Sophie and I saw together asked some hard questions. It made me realize just how much I've failed my daughter. You haven't failed her, Brielle said gently. You made mistakes, but you love her. That's what matters. Love isn't enough if I'm not showing it in ways she can understand, Julian replied. For the past 6 months since Amanda left, I've been drowning in my own pain and guilt. I threw myself into work because it was easier than facing what had happened. I told Sophie her mother was dead because I couldn't bear to tell her the truth, that Amanda chose to leave us. That she chose to abandon her own daughter for a new life in Paris with some artist she met at a gallery opening. Julian's voice was bitter now, old pain surfacing. I couldn't understand how a mother could do that, he continued. How could she just walk away from Sophie? So I lied. I told Sophie her mom had gotten sick and died. I even staged a small memorial service. I thought I was protecting her from worse pain. Instead, I just created a different kind of hurt. Sophie found out the truth, Brielle said softly. Julian nodded, his eyes glistening. She found letters that Amanda sent me. Letters where she made it very clear that she didn't want to be a mother anymore, that she wanted her freedom back. Sophie read them. Can you imagine? A 7-year-old reading those words about herself. Brielle's heart broke all over again for Sophie. When Sophie confronted me about it 3 weeks ago, I panicked, Julian admitted. I didn't know what to say. I got defensive. I told her she shouldn't have been going through my things. I shut down the conversation instead of having it. And then I went right back to work, avoiding the issue, avoiding her. The day she ran away, we had another argument. She asked me again why I lied, and I walked away. I went to my office and closed the door. When I came out hours later, she was gone. His voice broke on the last word. He put his face in his hands for a moment, composing himself. The police searched everywhere, he said. We had helicopters, search dogs, volunteers combing the areas around our house. We checked surveillance cameras. We followed every possible lead. And the whole time I kept thinking about how our last interaction was me walking away from her. What if that was the last memory she had of me? What if something terrible happened and I never got the chance to tell her I was sorry? Brielle reached over and touched Julian's hand. But she's safe. You found her. You have that chance now. Because of you, Julian said, looking up at her. You gave me that chance. You found her when she was in danger, you took her in, you made her feel safe and cared for. Sophie told me everything. How you wrapped your sweater around her, how you carried her on the bus, how you gave her your bed. How you and Brandon shared your food with her even though money is tight. How you played games with her and made her laugh. How you made her feel like she mattered. She does matter, Brielle said firmly. Every child matters. Sophie also told me what you said about her mother leaving, Julian continued. How you explained that it wasn't Sophie's fault, that she was perfect just as she is. Those words helped her more than anything I've said in months. You gave her something I couldn't seem to give her, something I'd forgotten how to give. You made her feel truly seen and valued. Brielle felt her cheeks warm. I just treated her the way any child deserves to be treated. Exactly, Julian said. And that's what I need to learn how to do again. The therapist said I need to be present with Sophie, not just physically but emotionally. I need to show her through my actions, not just my words, that she's my priority. I need to rebuild the trust one broke. You can do that, Brielle encouraged. It will take time, but you can. Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I need help. Professional help from the therapist, yes, but also practical help. Someone who understands how to connect with Sophie, how to make her feel secure. Someone she trusts. Brielle waited, sensing where this was going but not daring to assume. Sophie asked me if she could see you again, Julian said. She talks about you constantly. About how safe she felt with you, how you listened to her, how you made her favorite foods even though you didn't know what they were. You just paid attention and figured it out. She wants you in her life. I'd love to see Sophie again, Brielle said warmly. She can visit anytime you'd like. I was thinking more than just visits, Julian said carefully. I want to hire you. Brielle blinked. Hire me? For what? To help me reconnect with Sophie, Julian explained. To teach me how to be the father she needs. You work 2 jobs right now, correct? The diner and night cleaning? Brielle nodded slowly, wondering how he knew that but realizing Sophie must have told him. I want to offer you a position, Julian said. A consultant position, I suppose. I'll pay you more than you make at both jobs combined. Your role would be to spend time with Sophie and me together, to help facilitate our relationship, to show me how to be present with her. And also to be there for Sophie as someone she trusts, someone stable in her life. Brielle shook her head immediately. Mr. Parker, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not qualified for something like that. I don't have any special training. I'm just a single mom trying to get by. I helped Sophie because I cared about her, not because I have some expertise. That's exactly why you're perfect for this, Julian insisted. You're not some clinical professional who's going to give me a list of parenting strategies to implement. You're a real person, a real parent who knows how to love a child well. That's what Sophie needs. That's what I need to learn. I don't know, Brielle said hesitantly. She needed the money desperately, but this felt complicated. What you're asking for, that's not something that should be a job. That's just being there for people. And you're extraordinarily good at it, Julian replied. Please, Brielle. I'm not too proud to admit I need help. I've made a mess of things with my daughter. You've shown me it's possible to fix it, but I don't know how to do it on my own. Let me pay you to guide us through this. Brielle thought about her overdue electric bill, about Brandon's shoes with the worn-through soles, about the car repair she'd been putting off for months. If I say yes, she said slowly, it wouldn't change how I interact with Sophie. I wouldn't be doing it for the money. I'd be doing it because I care about her. I know, Julian said. That's why it has to be you. Brielle took a deep breath. All right. I'll help however I can. But let's start small. Maybe I can come over a few times a week? See how it goes. Julian's relief was visible. Thank you. Thank you so much. We can work out the details, the schedule, the payment, all of it. Whatever works for you. I have one condition, Brielle said. Anything. Brandon comes with me. I'm not leaving my son behind while I help someone else's child. Julian smiled for the first time since entering the apartment. Of course. Sophie would love that. She talks about Brandon too. How kind he was to her, how he shared his toys in his room. They talked for another hour working out the logistics. Julian insisted on a generous salary that made Brielle's eyes widen. He also insisted on paying off her overdue bills immediately, which she tried to refuse but finally accepted when he pointed out that she couldn't help his family if she was stressed about her own finances. This isn't charity, Julian said firmly. You're providing a valuable service. You're helping me become a better father. That's worth more than any amount of money I could pay you. As Julian stood to leave, he paused at the door. There's something else you should know. Something I haven't told many people. Brielle waited. When Amanda left, she didn't just leave me and Sophie. She left a letter explaining her reasons. She said she had gotten pregnant too young, married too young. That she felt trapped by motherhood and marriage. She said she loved Sophie but not enough to give up her dreams. She wanted to be free to pursue art and travel and a life without responsibilities. Julian's jaw tightened. She asked me not to contact her. She said she was signing over full custody, that she didn't want any visitation rights. She just wanted out. Clean and complete. As if our daughter was just something she could walk away from like a job she quit. I'm so sorry, Brielle said softly. The part that kills me, Julian continued, is that I don't even blame Amanda for wanting out of our marriage. We got married for the wrong reasons, we were wrong for each other. But to abandon Sophie? Your own child? I can't forgive that. And I can't understand it. Some people aren't meant to be parents, Brielle said. It doesn't make it right, but it's the reality. You became a parent young too, Julian said. Sophie mentioned you were 24 when Brandon was born. But you didn't abandon him. You've raised him alone, worked multiple jobs, sacrificed everything to give him a good life. That's different, Brielle replied. Brandon is my world. I can't imagine life without him. That's how I feel about Sophie, Julian said. Or how I should feel, how I want to feel every moment instead of just in bursts between work crises. You're going to help me figure out how to make her my world the way Brandon is yours. After Julian left, Brielle sat in her quiet apartment for a long time. Her life had just changed dramatically. She was going to quit both her jobs and work exclusively for Julian Parker, helping him reconnect with his daughter. She would be able to pay her bills, buy Brandon new shoes, maybe even save some money. But more than that, she would get to be part of Sophie's life. And something about that filled her with a happiness she hadn't felt in a long time. When Brandon came home from his after-school program, Brielle told him about the new arrangement. So I'll get to see Sophie again? Brandon asked excitedly. A lot, Brielle confirmed. We'll be spending time with her and her dad several times a week. Cool, Brandon said. Then more seriously, Mom, is Sophie's dad nice? She said he didn't spend time with her. He made mistakes, Brielle explained. But he loves Sophie very much and he wants to do better. We're going to help him. Okay, Brandon said. I can do that. I like Sophie. She's like a little sister. That night, as Brielle lay in bed, she thought about how strange life could be. A week ago, she had been struggling just to get by, working 2 exhausting jobs, barely making ends meet. Now she had a job that would change her financial situation completely, all because she had found a lost little girl by the side of a highway. She thought about Julian Parker, this powerful billionaire who had been brought to his knees by his daughter's disappearance. He had everything money could buy but had lost the most important thing: connection with his child. And she thought about Sophie, that sweet, wounded little girl who just wanted her father to see her, to really see her. Brielle didn't know exactly what she was getting into, but she knew one thing for certain. She was going to do everything in her power to help that family heal. The following Saturday, Brielle and Brandon arrived at Julian Parker's house for the first time. Brielle had known it would be impressive, but nothing prepared her for the reality of it. The estate sat behind tall iron gates that opened automatically when Julian's security system recognized the car he had sent for them. Yes, he had sent a car and driver. Brielle had tried to decline, saying she could drive herself, but Julian had insisted. Her own car was barely running, and he didn't want her to worry about it breaking down. The driveway alone was longer than the entire street Brielle lived on. Trees lined both sides, their branches creating a canopy overhead. When they rounded a curve and the house came into view, Brandon's mouth fell open. Whoa, he breathed. It's like a castle. It did look like something from a movie. The house was enormous, built of pale stone with tall windows and a circular driveway with a fountain in the center. The grounds stretched out in all directions, perfectly manicured lawns and gardens as far as Brielle could see. The driver opened their door and Brielle and Brandon stepped out. Before they could even reach the front steps, the massive wooden door swung open and Sophie came running out. "Miss Brielle." "Brandon," she called out, her face lit up with joy. Sophie wore a yellow sundress and looked healthier than she had during her time at Brielle's apartment. Her hair was neatly braided and her smile was genuine. She threw herself into Brielle's arms, then hugged Brandon. "I missed you so much," Sophie said. "Come see my room. And the playroom. And the backyard. We have a pool." Julian appeared in the doorway wearing jeans and a simple green button-down shirt. It was the most casual Brielle had seen him, and he looked younger, less burdened. "Sophie, let them at least get inside before you start the grand tour," he said with a smile. They entered the house and Brielle tried not to gape at the interior. Marble floors, high ceilings with chandeliers, a curved staircase that belonged in a palace. Artwork that probably cost more than Brielle would make in her lifetime hung on the walls. But despite all the luxury, something about the house felt cold. Empty. There was no clutter, no signs of life, no personal touches that made a place feel like a home. Julian seemed to notice Brielle's observations. "It's a bit much, isn't it?" he said quietly. "Amanda designed most of it. After she left, I didn't have the heart to change anything. Now I'm realizing that maybe I should have. It doesn't feel like a place where a child should grow up." "It's very beautiful," Brielle said diplomatically. "But not very warm," Julian finished. "You can say it. I know it's true." Sophie pulled Brandon toward the back of the house, chattering excitedly. Julian and Brielle followed at a slower pace. "How has this week been?" Brielle asked. "How's Sophie doing?" "Better," Julian replied. "We've had 2 therapy sessions together. It's hard hearing how much I've hurt her without meaning to. But the therapist is good. She's helping us both process everything." They walked through a gourmet kitchen where a woman was preparing food. Julian introduced her as Maggie, the housekeeper Sophie had mentioned. Maggie was a kind-looking woman in her 50s who smiled warmly at Brielle. "It's nice to meet the woman who helped our Sophie," Maggie said. "That little girl has been through so much." Through the kitchen windows, Brielle could see Sophie and Brandon on the back lawn. Sophie was showing Brandon something near the garden, both children laughing. "I took the whole week off work," Julian said. "First time I've done that in 3 years. I spent every day with Sophie. We played games, read books, talked. It was wonderful and terrifying at the same time." "Why terrifying?" Brielle asked. "Because I realized how little I know about my own daughter," Julian admitted. "Her favorite color, the food she likes, what makes her laugh. I thought I knew these things but I didn't. Not really. I knew them from 2 years ago but kids change. Sophie has changed and I wasn't paying attention." They moved outside to a covered patio area with comfortable seating overlooking the expansive backyard. The pool Sophie had mentioned was Olympic-sized, with a waterfall feature at one end. "This is what I need your help with," Julian said, gesturing toward where the children played. "Reconnecting with Sophie. Being present. I can read all the parenting books in the world but you know how to do this naturally. I need to learn from you." "You're already doing it," Brielle pointed out. "You took a week off work. You're here with her now. That's what she needs." "But I don't know how to sustain it," Julian said. "Part of me wants to check my phone every 5 minutes. I keep thinking about deals that need my attention, problems at the company. It's like I've forgotten how to just be a dad without also being a CEO." Brielle thought about this. "Maybe that's the problem. You're trying to be both at once. When you're with Sophie, you need to be only her dad. The CEO can take a break." "Is it really that simple?" "Not simple at all," Brielle said with a small smile. "But necessary. Sophie doesn't need your money or your success. She just needs you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the children. Brandon was pushing Sophie on a swing that hung from an enormous oak tree. Her laughter carried across the lawn. "Tell me about Brandon's father," Julian said suddenly. Then he shook his head. "Sorry, that's too personal. You don't have to answer that." "It's okay," Brielle replied. "There's not much to tell. Brandon's father was my boyfriend in college. When I got pregnant, he wanted me to get an abortion. I didn't want to. He said if I kept the baby, he was done. So he left. I never heard from him again. No child support, no contact, nothing. That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was," Brielle admitted. "I was 24, about to graduate with a degree in education. I had plans to be a teacher. But once Brandon was born, I realized I couldn't afford daycare on a teacher's salary as a single mother. So I took whatever jobs I could find that paid better, even if they weren't what I had dreamed of doing." "You sacrificed your dreams for your son." "I didn't sacrifice them," Brielle corrected gently. I rearranged them. Brandon is my dream now. Maybe someday when he's older I'll go back and finish what I started. But right now he's my focus. Julian looked at her with something like awe. You're remarkable, you know that? You've been through so much and you're still so full of kindness and hope. Brielle felt her cheeks warm. I'm not remarkable. I'm just doing what any parent would do. No, Julian said firmly. Not any parent. Trust me, I know. My own father was a workaholic who barely acknowledged I existed. Amanda abandoned her child. Not every parent puts their child first the way you do. Before Brielle could respond, Sophie and Brandon came running up, breathless and happy. Daddy, can we show Miss Brielle and Brandon the playroom? Sophie asked. Of course, Julian said, standing up. Lead the way. The playroom was on the second floor, and it was bigger than Brielle's entire apartment. It was filled with every toy imaginable: dollhouses, building blocks, art supplies, a reading nook with hundreds of books, even a small indoor climbing structure. Wow, Brandon said, his eyes huge. This is amazing. But despite all the toys, Brielle noticed that many of them looked untouched. They were arranged too perfectly, like a display in a store rather than a space where a child actually played. Sophie noticed Brielle looking around. I don't really use most of this stuff, she said quietly. It's more fun to play outside or to make up games. These toys are nice, but they're not really for playing. Julian frowned. What do you mean, baby? Of course they're for playing. That's why we bought them. They're too nice, Sophie tried to explain. Like, if I use them I might mess them up or lose pieces. The nannies always tell me to be careful with my things. Brielle exchanged a look with Julian. Here was another disconnect. Sophie had been given everything material but had been taught to treat her belongings so preciously that she couldn't actually enjoy them. Sophie, Brielle said, kneeling down to the girl's level. Toys are meant to be played with. They're supposed to get messy and worn. That's how you know they're well loved. At our house, Brandon's toys are all over the place and some of them are broken or missing pieces, but that's okay because he's actually using them. Really? Sophie looked at her father uncertainly. Really, Julian confirmed, understanding what Brielle was teaching him. Sophie, this is your playroom. You can use these toys however you want. Make messes. Mix things up. That's the whole point. Sophie's face brightened. Even the paint? The nanny said I can only use paint if they supervise because I might stain something. Especially the paint, Julian said. In fact, let's all paint something right now. For the next hour, the four of them sat at the art table and created paintings. Sophie was hesitant at first, carefully placing small amounts of paint on her paper. But as she watched Brandon enthusiastically splashing colors around, and as both Julian and Brielle encouraged her to just have fun, she loosened up. Soon there was paint on hands, paint on faces, and even some on the floor. Sophie laughed harder than Brielle had ever heard her laugh. When Maggie came to check on them and saw the mess, she just smiled and said, "It's about time this room got properly used." After they cleaned up, they all went downstairs for lunch. Maggie had prepared an impressive spread, but Brielle noticed Sophie picking at her food. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Brielle asked. "Don't you like it?" "It's good," Sophie said. "But I miss your grilled cheese sandwiches." Julian looked surprised. "You want grilled cheese? Maggie can make you grilled cheese anytime you want." "It's not the same," Sophie said. "Miss Brielle's are special." Brielle understood. It wasn't about the food. It was about the feeling of being in that small apartment where someone made lunch just for her with love, not as a job. "How about this?" Brielle suggested. "Next time we come over we'll make grilled cheese together. You and me and Brandon. We'll teach your dad too. And we can cut them into triangles?" Sophie asked hopefully. "Absolutely," Brielle confirmed. Julian watched this interaction with an expression Brielle couldn't quite read. Later after the meal he pulled Brielle aside. "Do you see what I mean?" he said quietly. "She has everything but what she wants is a simple sandwich made by someone who cares. I've been giving her things when what she needed was time and attention." "You're learning," Brielle said. "That's what matters. You see it now." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, the four of them. They swam in the pool, played games, and talked. Julian was still a bit awkward sometimes, unsure of how to engage with Sophie at her level. But Brielle watched him trying, really trying, and that was everything. When it was time to leave, Sophie hugged Brielle tightly. "Will you come back soon?" "Of course," Brielle promised. "We'll come back on Tuesday, okay?" As the driver took Brielle and Brandon home, Brandon said, "Mom, Sophie's dad is trying really hard." "He is," Brielle agreed. "I think he's going to be good at being a dad," Brandon said confidently. "He just needs practice." Brielle smiled at her wise son. I think you're right. That night after Brandon was asleep, Brielle's phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Thank you for today. I learned more about being Sophie's father in 6 hours than I have in 6 months. I'm grateful for your guidance. Brielle texted back, you did great. Keep showing up for her the way you did today. His response came quickly, I will. I promise. And for the first time, Brielle believed he would keep that promise. Over the next 2 weeks, Brielle and Brandon visited Julian's estate 4 times. Each visit showed progress. Julian was learning to be present with Sophie, to listen when she talked, to engage in her world instead of expecting her to understand his. On their 5th visit, Brielle arrived to find Julian and Sophie in the kitchen, flour all over both of them in the counters. We're making cookies, Sophie announced proudly. Real cookies from scratch, not the kind from the store. I see that, Brielle said, smiling at the mess. Julian had flour in his hair and what looked like chocolate on his shirt, but he was grinning. We're terrible at this, Julian admitted cheerfully. But we're having fun being terrible at it. That's the whole point, Brielle laughed. The cookies turned out lumpy and overcooked, but Sophie declared them the best cookies ever because she and her daddy had made them together. Later, while the kids played in the backyard, Julian and Brielle sat on the patio with iced tea. I've been thinking about something, Julian said. The therapist suggested it and I think it's a good idea. I want to make some changes to the house. What kind of changes? Brielle asked. I want to make it feel more like a home, he explained. Repaint some rooms in warmer colors. Add more comfortable furniture. Maybe create some spaces that are specifically for Sophie and me to spend time together, like a family room with a regular TV instead of just the formal living room with the giant theater system. That sounds wonderful, Brielle said. I want your input, Julian continued. You've created a real home in your small apartment. This huge house has everything, but it doesn't feel like a home. I don't even know where to start. It's not about how much you spend, Brielle told him. It's about making spaces that reflect the people who live there. Right now this house looks like a magazine. You need it to look like a place where Julian and Sophie Parker live, with their interests and personalities and love. Julian nodded thoughtfully. Will you help me? Not just with advice but actually help me pick things out, make decisions? Of course, Brielle agreed. Over the next week, Brielle spent time with Julian going through the house, identifying spaces that could be transformed. They decided to convert one of the formal dining rooms into a family room with a comfortable couch, bookshelves for Sophie's books, and space for games and puzzles. They planned to redecorate Sophie's bedroom to make it feel cozier and more personal. Julian insisted that Brielle pick out anything she thought would help. At first, she was uncomfortable with the budget he gave her, but he was adamant. Brielle, I need you to understand something, he said seriously. Money is not an issue for me. What's valuable is the knowledge and care you're bringing to this process. Please don't hold back because you're worried about cost. So Brielle let herself choose things she thought would make the house feel like a real home. Soft blankets, comfortable pillows, warm lighting, photos and frames ready to be filled with family memories, art supplies that were meant to be used, books that were meant to be read with pages dog-eared and spines creased. During this process, Brielle spent more and more time at the estate. What had started as a few visits a week became nearly daily. Julian insisted on paying her for every hour, and the money was more than Brielle had ever dreamed of making. She paid off all her debts, set up a savings account for Brandon's future education, bought him new clothes and shoes, and even started looking at the possibility of moving to a better apartment. But more than the money, what made Brielle happy was watching Julian and Sophie's relationship transform. Julian had cut back his hours at work dramatically. He still ran his company, but he had delegated more responsibilities and set firm boundaries about his time. He had dinner with Sophie every night. He read her stories before bed. He attended her school events. Sophie blossomed under her father's attention. The sad, scared little girl who had run away was being replaced by a confident, joyful child who knew she was loved. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into this new arrangement, Julian asked Brielle to stay after the children had gone to play. I need to tell you something, he said, looking nervous in a way Brielle hadn't seen before. What is it? She asked, concerned. I'm developing feelings for you, Julian said quietly. Feelings beyond gratitude or friendship. I think I'm falling in love with you. Brielle's breath caught. She had been so focused on helping Julian and Sophie that she hadn't let herself acknowledge her own growing feelings. But now that he had said it out loud, she couldn't deny it anymore. She had feelings for him too. Julian, she started, unsure of what to say. I know this is complicated, he said quickly. I'm technically your employer. There's a significant difference in our financial situations. And I just got out of a marriage 6 months ago. The timing is terrible. But I can't pretend I don't feel what I feel. You've brought light back into my life, into Sophie's life, into this house. You've taught me how to be a better father, a better person. How could I not fall in love with you? Brielle's heart was racing. I feel the same way, she admitted. But you're right, it's complicated. I don't want Sophie to think I came into your lives for any reason other than to help her. And I don't want people to think I'm with you for your money. I don't care what people think, Julian said. But I understand your concerns. I don't want to do anything that would hurt Sophie either. She's just starting to heal. Maybe we need to slow down, Brielle suggested. Not stop, just take our time. Make sure this is real and not just emotions running high because of everything that's happened. Julian nodded. You're right. That's the wise choice. He smiled. You're always the wise one. I don't know about that, Brielle said with a small laugh. I do, Julian replied. You're wise and kind and strong. You're beautiful inside and out. And I'm willing to wait as long as it takes, if it means there's a chance for us. They agreed to continue as they had been, but with an acknowledgement of their feelings. They would let their relationship develop naturally over time with no pressure or rush. What would you do if you fell in love with someone from a completely different world? Could love really bridge the gap between their lives? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to find out what happens next in Brielle and Julian's story. But keeping their feelings hidden proved harder than expected. Small moments kept happening. Their hands would brush when reaching for something. Their eyes would meet across the room and they would share a smile. The way Julian looked at Brielle when she was teaching Sophie something. The way Brielle's heart skipped when Julian laughed. Sophie, perceptive as children are, noticed something too. One day, while Brielle was helping Sophie get ready for bed, the little girl said, "Miss Brielle, do you like my daddy?" Brielle chose her words carefully. "Of course I like your daddy. He's become a good friend." "No, I mean, do you like him?" Sophie pressed. "Like, the way princesses like princes in stories?" Brielle felt her cheeks heat. "Why do you ask that?" "Because he smiles a lot when you're here," Sophie said. "And he looks at you the way Brandon looks at cookies." Brielle couldn't help but laugh at that comparison. "Your daddy and I care about each other. But right now the most important thing is you. Making sure you're happy and that you and your daddy have a strong relationship." Sophie thought about this. "But what if I want you to be around forever? Not just as someone daddy hired, but as part of our family?" "Oh, sweetheart," Brielle said, hugging her. "I'm not going anywhere. No matter what happens, I'll always be in your life if you want me to be." "I do want that," Sophie said firmly. "You and Brandon. I want you to be my family." That night, Brielle told Julian about the conversation. They were sitting in the newly decorated family room, the space that now felt warm and lived in. "She's not wrong," Julian said. "I do look at you the way Brandon looks at cookies." Brielle laughed despite herself. "That's quite the comparison." "But accurate," Julian replied, his voice becoming serious. "Brielle, I know we agreed to take things slow. But I need you to know that I'm not interested in anything temporary. When I imagine my future, you're in it. You and Brandon both. I'm not saying we rush into anything, but I want you to know my intentions are serious." "My intentions are serious too," Brielle admitted. "But Julian, we come from such different worlds. I'm a single mom who was barely getting by 3 weeks ago. You're a billionaire. People will talk. They'll judge." "Let them," Julian said. "The only opinions that matter are ours, Sophie's and Brandon's. Everyone else can think what they want." "What about Sophie?" Brielle asked. "How do we make sure this doesn't confuse her or hurt her, especially after everything with her mother?" "We're honest with her," Julian said. "In an age-appropriate way we tell her the truth. That we care about each other. That we're exploring what that means. And that no matter what, nothing will change how much I love her or how much you care about her." Brielle nodded slowly. "All right. But we still take it slow. No rushing. We make sure this is right for everyone, especially the kids." "Agreed," Julian said. He reached over and took her hand. It was the first time they had held hands, and the touch sent warmth through Brielle's entire body. "Thank you for being patient with me. With all of us." "Thank you for letting me be part of your journey," Brielle replied. They sat like that for a while, holding hands, both knowing that something significant was beginning but content to let it unfold in its own time. A month and a half after Brielle had first found Sophie by the highway, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Brielle had officially quit both her jobs and now worked exclusively for Julian, though the nature of her work had evolved beyond the original arrangement. She was still helping Julian and Sophie strengthen their bond, but now she was also managing the household in ways that made it feel more like a home. She coordinated family activities, planned meals that everyone ate together, and created traditions that Sophie could count on. Brandon had become Sophie's constant companion. The two children were inseparable when they were together, more like siblings than friends. Julian had set up a room for Brandon at the estate so he could stay over whenever Brielle's schedule required it, though Brandon still primarily lived with his mother in their apartment. On a Tuesday evening in late September, Brielle was helping Sophie with her homework at the kitchen table while Julian prepared dinner. Yes, Julian was cooking. It was something Brielle had encouraged, and he had taken to it enthusiastically, though his skills were still developing. "Daddy's getting better," Sophie whispered to Brielle, glancing at her father who was concentrating intently on chopping vegetables. "Remember when he burned the chicken so bad we had to order pizza?" Brielle bit back a smile. "He's learning. And the important thing is that he's trying." "I know," Sophie said. "I like that we cook together now. Even when it doesn't turn out good." Julian called over his shoulder, "I heard that. And for your information, tonight's dinner is going to be excellent." Both Sophie and Brielle exchanged skeptical looks and then burst into giggles. "Just for that, you two have to set the table," Julian said, but he was smiling. After dinner, which was indeed pretty good, the four of them settled in the family room for their now routine evening activity. Sometimes they played board games, sometimes they watched a movie, sometimes they just talked. Tonight they decided on a card game that Brandon had taught them. As they played, Brielle watched Julian with Sophie. He was so different from the haggard, desperate man who had shown up at her apartment 6 weeks ago. He laughed easily now. He was relaxed. He paid attention to the little things like remembering that Sophie preferred the blue playing pieces or that she got cold easily and might need a sweater. "Miss Brielle, it's your turn," Sophie said, pulling Brielle from her thoughts. "Sorry I was distracted," Brielle said, drawing a card. "You've been distracted a lot lately," Julian observed, his eyes twinkling. Brielle felt her cheeks warm. It was true. She had been distracted because she kept catching herself watching Julian, noticing things about him. The way he ran his fingers through his hair when he was thinking. The sound of his laugh. The gentleness in his hands when he hugged Sophie. The way his eyes lit up when Brielle entered a room. She was falling in love with him and it was becoming harder to hide. After the kids went to bed, Julian and Brielle had their customary evening conversation on the patio. It had become a routine, this quiet time together where they could talk about the day, about Sophie's progress, about anything really. "I have something I want to discuss with you," Julian said, his tone serious. Brielle's stomach fluttered nervously. "Okay. Your apartment," Julian began. "It's not in a great neighborhood. I worry about you and Brandon there, especially when you're working here late and having to drive home in the dark." "We're fine," Brielle said automatically, though truthfully she had the same concerns. "I know you're capable and careful," Julian said. "But I'd feel better if you and Brandon were somewhere safer. I'd like to help you move to a better place." Brielle stiffened. "Julian, you're already paying me generously. I can't accept more money from you." "It's not about money," Julian replied. "It's about the people I care about being safe. You and Brandon matter to me. To Sophie and me both. Let me help." "I appreciate it, but no," Brielle said firmly. "I need to do some things on my own. I have savings now because of the salary you're paying me. When I'm ready, I'll find a better place." Julian looked like he wanted to argue but stopped himself. "All right. But will you at least promise to let me know if you need anything? If your car breaks down, if there's an emergency, anything at all?" "I promise," Brielle agreed. They sat in silence for a moment, then Julian said quietly, "I hate this." "Hate what?" "Having to hold back," he admitted. "Having to pretend I don't want to help you with everything, give you everything, be with you every moment. We said we'd take things slow and I respect that. But Brielle, every day it gets harder not to tell you how much you mean to me." Brielle's heart was pounding. "Julian, I'm not asking you to rush," he said quickly. "I'm just telling you how I feel. I'm in love with you. Completely, deeply in love with you. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you mother Sophie like she's your own child. I love how you've taught me to be a better father, a better person. I love your laugh and your wisdom and the way you see the good in people even when they've made mistakes." Tears pricked Brielle's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it." Julian moved closer, taking both her hands in his. "Then why are we waiting? What are we afraid of?" "I'm afraid people will think I'm with you for your money," Brielle said. I'm afraid Sophie will feel betrayed, like I came into her life with ulterior motives. I'm afraid of the class difference and what that means for us long term. I'm afraid. Julian stopped her by gently placing a finger on her lips. Those are all valid fears. But Brielle, love is always a risk. And you're worth any risk. You and Brandon both. I want us to be a family. Not just you working for me, not just being friends. A real family. What about Brandon? Brielle asked. He's my son. If we do this, you're not just getting me. You're getting a package deal. I know, Julian said. And I love that boy. He's smart and kind and he's been so good to Sophie. I would be honored to be a father figure in his life, if he'll have me. And Sophie? Brielle pressed. How does she factor into this? Sophie told me 3 days ago that she hopes we get married, Julian revealed. She said she wants you to be her real mom, and Brandon to be her real brother. Brielle's eyes widened. She said that? She did. And you know what? I want that too. Not right away, I know we need time. But eventually I want to marry you, Brielle. I want us to build a life together, all four of us. Brielle felt like her heart might burst. This was everything she hadn't let herself dream of because it seemed impossible. A man who loved her son, who wanted to build a family with them. A man who had proven through his actions that he could change and grow. A man whose daughter already held Brielle's heart. I want that too, she admitted. It scares me, but I want it. Julian smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his whole face. Then let's stop being scared. Let's move forward together. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Brielle didn't want to pull away. When his lips met hers, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle, tender, full of promise and hope. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. So what does this mean? Brielle asked. What are we now? We're together, Julian said simply. We're a couple. We'll tell the kids, we'll figure out the logistics, we'll take it one day at a time. But we're doing it together, no more holding back. The next morning they sat down with Sophie and Brandon at breakfast. Both kids looked at them expectantly, as if they had sensed something had changed. Kids, we have something to tell you, Julian began. You're dating, Sophie said immediately, grinning. Finally. Brandon nodded seriously. We already knew. We talk about it at night sometimes. We were wondering when you guys would figure it out. Brielle and Julian looked at each other and burst out laughing. Were we really that obvious? Brielle asked. Super obvious, Brandon confirmed. You smile at each other all the time. And Daddy's face gets red when you laugh, Sophie added. It's cute. Julian ran a hand through his hair, embarrassed but happy. Well, since you two already knew, what do you think about it? I think it's great, Sophie said. Does this mean Miss Brielle will be here all the time? And Brandon too. We'll have to figure out exactly what that looks like, Julian said. But yes, we'll all be spending more time together. Is that okay with both of you? Both children nodded enthusiastically. Can Brandon be my real brother? Sophie asked. Not just my friend? If that's what you both want, Brielle said, looking at her son. That would be cool, Brandon said. I always wanted a sister. The conversation continued, the four of them talking about what this new family configuration might look like. There were logistics to work out, feelings to consider, adjustments to make. But there was also so much love in the room, so much hope and excitement about the future. Later that day, after the kids were playing outside, Julian pulled Brielle aside. I know we agreed to take things slow, he said. But I want to do something. I want you and Brandon to move in here. With us. Make this house your home too. Brielle's first instinct was to refuse, to say it was too soon. But then she thought about the apartment she and Brandon lived in, with its thin walls and questionable neighborhood. She thought about Brandon's excitement at having Sophie as a sister. She thought about how much time they were already spending at the estate anyway. And she thought about what it would mean to say yes, accepting help, accepting love, accepting that she deserved good things. Okay, she heard herself say. Yes, we'll move in. Julian's eyes lit up. Really? You mean it? I mean it, Brielle confirmed. But I pay rent. Absolutely not, Julian said. This is your home, not a rental. Julian. Brielle, please. Let me do this. Let me give you and Brandon a safe, comfortable place to live. Let me give Sophie the family she's been dreaming of. Let me be generous with the people I love. Brielle saw the earnestness in his eyes and felt her resistance crumble. All right. But I'm contributing to household expenses in other ways. I'll manage the household, coordinate activities, all of it. Deal, Julian agreed quickly before she could change her mind. He pulled her into his arms. Thank you. Thank you for trusting me, for trusting us. That night, Brielle and Brandon returned to their apartment for one of the last times. As she packed their belongings, Brandon sat on his bed watching. Mom, are you happy? He asked. Brielle stopped packing and looked at her son. Yes, baby. I'm very happy. Are you? Yeah, Brandon said. I like Mr. Julian. He's nice. And Sophie is fun. It'll be cool to live in that big house and have a pool. It's not just about the big house, Brielle said, sitting beside him. You know that, right? I'm not with Julian because of his money. I know, Mom, Brandon said wisely. You're with him because you love each other. I can tell. Brielle hugged her son. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart, Brandon replied with a grin. You just didn't notice because you were too busy taking care of me. And I'll always take care of you, Brielle said. No matter what changes, that never will. I know, Brandon said. That's why I'm okay with all of this. Because I know you've got my back. As Brielle continued packing, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just 6 weeks. She had gone from struggling to make ends meet to falling in love with a billionaire. From barely getting by to living in a mansion. From being alone to being part of a family. It was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. But as she looked at Brandon's happy face and thought about Sophie's joy, and remembered the way Julian looked at her like she was his whole world, Brielle knew she was making the right choice. Sometimes the best things in life came from unexpected places. Like finding a lost little girl by the side of a highway and having that moment change everything. The move into Julian's estate took a week. Brielle insisted on donating most of their old furniture to families who needed it, keeping only the items that held sentimental value. Julian had rooms prepared for both Brielle and Brandon, though he made it clear that the sleeping arrangements were entirely up to Brielle. We have time, he assured her. There's no rush for anything. Brandon's room was near Sophie's, connected by a shared bathroom that the kids were thrilled about. Brielle's room was in the main wing, beautiful and spacious with a sitting area and a balcony overlooking the gardens. It was more luxury than she had ever imagined for herself. On their first official night living at the estate, Julian organized a celebration dinner. He had arranged for Maggie to take the evening off so the 4 of them could cook together in the massive kitchen. They made a chaotic, messy meal of homemade pizza with toppings each person chose. Sophie's had extra cheese and pepperoni. Brandon's had vegetables and olives. Julian attempted a more sophisticated combination that didn't quite work. Brielle's was simple and perfect. They ate at the kitchen table rather than the formal dining room, laughing and talking, tomato sauce on fingers and flour still dusting the counter. It was exactly the kind of family meal Brielle had always dreamed of having. After dinner, while the kids watched a movie in the family room, Julian asked Brielle to take a walk with him through the gardens. The evening air was cool and pleasant, the grounds lit by soft landscape lighting. I want to show you something, Julian said, leading her down a path she hadn't noticed before. They walked for a few minutes until they reached a small clearing with a gazebo. Inside the gazebo was a bench and a small table with photos and candles. This was Amanda's memorial space, Julian explained. After she left, I created this because I thought Sophie needed a place to feel close to her mother, even though I had lied about what actually happened. I haven't known what to do with it since Sophie learned the truth. Brielle looked at the photos. They showed Amanda as a beautiful woman with blonde hair and blue eyes like Sophie. In the pictures she was smiling, but something about her smile seemed forced, uncomfortable. She never wanted to be a mother, Julian said quietly. I knew that from early in the pregnancy, but I thought she would change her mind once Sophie was born. And she tried, I'll give her that. For Sophie's first few years, Amanda really tried to be present and engaged. But you could see it was wearing on her. She was miserable. That must have been difficult for you, Brielle said. The worst part was watching Sophie try so hard to make her mother love her, Julian continued. Sophie would bring Amanda drawings, would perform little songs and dances, would try to be perfect. And Amanda would smile and praise her, but it was hollow. Sophie felt it even as a small child. Is that when Amanda decided to leave? She started talking about it when Sophie was 5, Julian said. At first I refused to consider it. How could she abandon her daughter? But she was adamant. She said staying was destroying her, that she needed to live her own life. We fought about it for over a year. Finally, she just left one day while Sophie was at school. Left a note, some legal documents, and disappeared. Julian sat on the bench and Brielle joined him. I handled it terribly, he admitted. I was so angry at Amanda, so hurt that I threw myself into work. I thought if I could just build the company bigger, make more money, achieve more success, it would somehow make up for Sophie losing her mother. But Sophie didn't need success. She needed her father. You understand that now, Brielle said gently. Because of you, Julian replied. You showed me what real parenting looks like. Not providing things but providing presence. You've given me and Sophie a second chance at being a family. He stood and faced Brielle, taking her hands in his. I want to dismantle this memorial. It's based on a lie and it keeps us tied to the past. But I wanted to ask you first if you thought that was the right thing to do. Brielle thought carefully. I think you should talk to Sophie about it. Explain that it was created when you were both grieving something that didn't happen the way you thought. Maybe Sophie has some feelings about how to handle this space. Julian smiled. See? That's exactly the kind of wisdom I need. You always know the right answer. Not always, Brielle said. But I try. They walked back to the house hand in hand. Inside they found Sophie and Brandon asleep on the couch, Brandon's arm protectively around Sophie's shoulder. The movie was still playing but both kids were out cold. Should we wake them? Julian whispered. Let's just carry them to bed, Brielle suggested. Julian lifted Sophie and Brielle guided Brandon, and they took the children to their respective rooms. After tucking them in, Julian and Brielle stood in the hallway between the two bedrooms. This is what family looks like, Julian said softly. Kids falling asleep together. Parents working as a team to take care of them. I didn't think I'd get this again after Amanda left. You have it now, Brielle said. We all do. Julian pulled her close. I want to give you something. Will you come to my study for a moment? In Julian's study, a room Brielle had only been in a few times, he opened a desk drawer and pulled out a small box. But it wasn't the ring box Brielle half expected. It was larger, flatter. I know we're not ready for engagement rings yet, Julian said, reading her mind. But I wanted to give you something that represents what you mean to me, to us. He opened the box to reveal a delicate necklace. The pendant was two intertwined hearts, one larger and one smaller, made of simple gold. The two hearts represent Sophie and Brandon, Julian explained. They're connected, intertwined, the way our families are now. I had it custom made for you. Tears filled Brielle's eyes. Julian, it's beautiful. He took the necklace out and fastened it around her neck. You've given me and Sophie everything. Our family, our happiness, our future. This is just a small symbol of how grateful I am. Brielle touched the pendant, feeling the smooth gold under her fingers. I don't know what to say. Say you'll marry me, Julian said suddenly. Then he shook his head. No, I'm sorry. I said I wouldn't rush you. Forget I said that. But Brielle was smiling through her tears. Ask me again in 6 months. If you still feel the same way, if our family is still working as well as it is now, ask me then. In 6 months, Julian repeated. That's a promise. They kissed, gentle and sweet, surrounded by books and the soft lamplight of the study. The next morning at breakfast, Sophie noticed the necklace immediately. That's so pretty, Miss Brielle, she said. Did Daddy give it to you? He did, Brielle confirmed. Do you want to see what it represents? She explained about the two hearts being Sophie and Brandon, connected as siblings. Sophie's face lit up with joy. So we're really a family now? She asked. We really are, Brielle confirmed. Sophie got up from the table and hugged both Brielle and her father. This is the best thing ever. I have a mom and a dad and a brother. I have everything. Brandon grinned. And you're not even annoying like some sisters probably are. You're not annoying either, Sophie retorted. Most of the time. Over the next few months they settled into a beautiful routine. Julian continued to work, but he maintained strict boundaries about his time. He was home for dinner every night. He attended every school event for both Sophie and Brandon. He took Sundays completely off to spend with the family. Brielle managed the household but also started exploring her old dream of teaching. Julian encouraged her to take some online courses to refresh her teaching certification. Maybe someday she would go back to education, but for now she was happy with her role in their blended family. The four of them took a vacation together to a beach resort. They celebrated Brandon's 9th birthday with a huge party that included Sophie's friends from school. They carved pumpkins for Halloween and made Thanksgiving dinner together, with predictably mixed results that had them all laughing. Through it all, Julian and Brielle's relationship deepened. They learned each other's habits and quirks. They navigated disagreements with respect and communication. They supported each other through difficult days and celebrated successes together. And through it all, Sophie and Brandon grew closer. They were truly siblings now, bickering sometimes but always having each other's backs. Sophie's confidence grew. Brandon thrived in the better school district near the estate. 6 months came faster than Brielle expected. On a March evening, exactly 6 months from the day Brielle and Brandon had moved into the estate, Julian asked Brielle to meet him in the garden. When she arrived, she found the old memorial gazebo completely transformed. The photos and candles were gone. In their place were beautiful flowering plants and a new bench. It was no longer a shrine to the past but a celebration of growth and new beginnings. Julian stood in the center, wearing a dark blue suit, looking nervous and excited. 6 months ago, I asked you to give me 6 months, he said as Brielle approached. To prove that what I felt was real and lasting. To show you that our family could work. You've more than proven that, Brielle said, her heart racing. Julian dropped to one knee and pulled out a ring box. Inside was a simple, elegant diamond ring. Brielle Thompson, you found my daughter when she was lost. But you also found me when I was lost. You've taught me how to be a father, how to be present, how to love without reservation. You've given me a family I didn't think I deserved. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Sophie's mother, and let me be a father to Brandon? Will you build this life with me, officially and forever? Brielle was crying, but they were happy tears. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Julian slipped the ring on her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her deeply. When they pulled apart, they heard clapping. Sophie and Brandon emerged from behind some bushes, both grinning widely. You two were watching? Brielle asked, laughing. Daddy told us he was going to propose, Sophie explained. We wanted to see. And you said yes, Brandon added with satisfaction. I knew you would. The four of them came together in a group hug, holding each other close. We're really getting married? Sophie asked, looking up at her father and Brielle. We really are, Julian confirmed. Can I call you Mom? Sophie asked Brielle hesitantly. I mean, I know you're not my biological mom, but you feel like my mom. Brielle knelt down to Sophie's level. I would be honored if you called me Mom. And I promise to always be here for you, to love you and support you, just like I do for Brandon. Sophie threw her arms around Brielle's neck. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart, Brielle replied, her voice thick with emotion. Brandon looked at Julian. Can I call you Dad? Or is that weird? Julian's eyes filled with tears. I would love that, Brandon. I would be so proud to be your dad. Cool, Brandon said, trying to play it casual but unable to hide his smile. Dad. That night, after the kids were asleep, Julian and Brielle sat in their usual spot on the patio, looking at the ring on Brielle's finger. I can't believe this is my life now, Brielle said softly. A year ago I was struggling to pay bills, working 2 jobs, barely getting by. Now I'm engaged to you, living in this beautiful home, part of a family. You deserve all of this and more, Julian said. You've always deserved it. The universe just took a while to deliver. Sometimes I worry people will think I'm a gold digger, Brielle admitted. That I found Sophie and saw an opportunity. Anyone who knows us, who sees us together, will know that's not true, Julian replied. And anyone who doesn't know us doesn't matter. You love me for who I am, not what I have. You've proven that in 1,000 ways. I do love you, Brielle said. So much it sometimes scares me. It scares me too, Julian admitted. The thought of losing this, losing you, losing what we've built. But that's how I know it's real. Real love is powerful and precious and a little bit terrifying. They sat together under the stars, planning their future. They would get married in the garden where Julian had proposed, with just close friends and family. Sophie and Brandon would both be in the wedding party. They would continue building their family, creating traditions and memories. Do you think we'll have more children? Brielle asked. I mean, together? Julian looked at her with surprise. Would you want that? Maybe, Brielle said. Someday. I'm not saying now, but I'm 33, you're 36. We could. If we wanted to. I would love to have a baby with you, Julian said, his voice full of emotion. A child that's ours together. But I'm also happy with the family we have. Sophie and Brandon are more than enough. Let's see where life takes us, Brielle decided. Right now, I just want to enjoy this moment. Being engaged to you. Planning our wedding. Watching our kids grow up together. That sounds perfect, Julian agreed. And it was perfect. Not in the sense that everything was always easy or that problems never arose. But perfect in the way that matters. They had love, they had commitment, they had a family built on honesty and care and showing up for each other every single day. From the moment Brielle had found Sophie by that highway, scared and alone, To this moment sitting beside Julian as his fiancée, so much had changed. But some things remained constant. Brielle's kindness, her dedication to the children, her belief that love and hope could heal even the deepest wounds. And she had been right. The wedding took place on a perfect June morning, 6 months after Julian's proposal. The garden had been transformed into an elegant outdoor venue with white chairs arranged in rows, an arch covered in white roses and greenery, and soft music playing from a string quartet. The guest list was small and intimate. Julian's business partners and their families, some of Sophie's and Brandon's friends from school, Maggie the housekeeper who had become like family, and a few close friends Brielle had maintained through the years. Brielle stood in the upstairs bedroom that had become hers, looking at herself in the full-length mirror. Her wedding dress was simple and elegant, a flowing white gown with delicate lace detail. The necklace Julian had given her, the one with the 2 intertwined hearts, rested against her collarbone. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and her makeup was natural and glowing. "Mom, you look like a princess," Sophie said from the doorway. She wore a beautiful lavender dress, her role as junior bridesmaid making her stand tall with pride. "You look pretty amazing yourself, sweetheart," Brielle replied, smiling at the little girl who would officially become her daughter in just a few minutes. Brandon appeared behind Sophie, looking handsome in his dark blue suit as Julian's best man. At 9 years old, he took his role very seriously. "Dad is really nervous downstairs," Brandon reported. "He keeps checking his tie." Brielle's heart warmed every time Brandon called Julian Dad. It had become natural for both children. Sophie called Brielle Mom, and the 4 of them had truly become a family in every sense of the word. "Is it time?" Brielle asked. "Almost," Sophie said. "But first we have something for you." The children came into the room and Brandon pulled out a small wrapped box. "We picked this out together," he explained. "Sophie and me. We wanted to give you something special for your wedding day." Brielle opened the box to find a delicate bracelet with 4 charms. A heart engraved with Brielle, another with Julian, a third with Sophie, and a 4th with Brandon. "So we're all together," Sophie explained. "All 4 of us connected forever." Tears filled Brielle's eyes. She hugged both children close. "Thank you. This is the most perfect gift. I'll wear it every day." She fastened the bracelet on her wrist, and Sophie carefully helped her wipe away her tears without smudging her makeup. "Okay," Brielle said, taking a deep breath. "Let's go get married." The ceremony was beautiful and emotional. Julian stood at the altar in a dark gray suit, his eyes never leaving Brielle as she walked down the aisle with Brandon on one side and Sophie on the other. Both children gave her away, a symbolic gesture of the family they were all choosing together. The vows were traditional but heartfelt. When Julian said, "I do," his voice cracked with emotion. When Brielle said, "I do," she looked not just at Julian but at both children standing beside them, including all of them in that promise. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared. "You may kiss your bride." Julian kissed Brielle tenderly while their guests applauded. Sophie and Brandon cheered and hugged each other. It was perfect. The reception was held on the lawn near the pool. There was dinner, dancing, and laughter. Sophie and Brandon gave a joint toast that had everyone crying and laughing at the same time. "Before we met Brielle," Sophie said into the microphone, reading from a paper they had prepared together, "my dad and I were sad. We didn't really know how to be a family anymore. And before we met Julian and Sophie," Brandon continued, "my mom and I were happy but we were also lonely sometimes. We wanted more people to love. Now we have each other," Sophie said. "And we're not sad or lonely anymore. We're a real family." "We love you, Mom and Dad," Brandon finished. "Thanks for bringing us all together." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Later in the evening, as Brielle and Julian shared their first dance as husband and wife, Julian whispered in her ear, "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "Only about a dozen times," Brielle replied with a smile. "Not nearly enough then," Julian said. "Brielle Parker, I love you more than words can say. You saved my daughter's life. You saved my life. You've given me everything." "You've given me everything too," Brielle replied. "A family, a home, a future I never imagined possible." As they danced, Brielle caught sight of Sophie and Brandon dancing together nearby, both children laughing and happy. This was what she had hoped for when she found Sophie by that highway 15 months ago. Not this specific outcome, of course. She could never have predicted falling in love with Julian or building this life. But she had hoped that Sophie would find her way back to happiness, back to her father, back to being a carefree child who felt loved and secure. And she had. They all had. The celebration continued into the evening. At one point, Maggie pulled Brielle aside. "I've worked for Mr. Parker for 10 years, Maggie said. I watched him during his marriage to Amanda, saw how unhappy they both were. I watched him fall apart after she left. And I watched him slowly disappear into work, becoming a ghost in his own home. But you brought him back to life. You brought light back into this house. Thank you for that." "I didn't do anything special," Brielle said. "I just loved him and Sophie." "That's exactly what was special," Maggie replied with a knowing smile. As the night wound down and guests began to leave, Julian and Brielle stood together near the garden where they had gotten engaged, watching Sophie and Brandon catching fireflies on the lawn. "We're going on our honeymoon tomorrow," Julian said. 2 weeks in Europe. "Are you ready?" "I'm ready," Brielle confirmed. "Though I'll miss the kids." They had decided to take a proper honeymoon, just the two of them. Sophie and Brandon would stay at the estate with Maggie and Julian's sister, who had flown in from California for the wedding. It would be the first time Brielle had been away from Brandon for more than a night or two, but she knew he would be fine. He and Sophie would keep each other company. "When we get back," Julian said, "I want to talk about something." "What?" Brielle asked. "Maybe expanding our family," Julian said, glancing at her. "If you're still interested in having another baby." Brielle's heart skipped. "Are you serious?" "Completely," Julian replied. "Sophie and Brandon are both getting older. And I keep thinking about what it would be like to have a baby with you. A child that's ours from the beginning, that we raised together from day one." "I would love that," Brielle said softly. "I would absolutely love that." "Then let's make it a plan," Julian said, pulling her close. "Not right away, maybe in a year or so. But let's plan for it." They stood together, watching their children play, imagining their future. More children, more love, more life together. A month after they returned from their honeymoon, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at the house, forwarded through Julian's attorney. It was from Amanda. Julian showed it to Brielle before opening it. "I don't know if I want to read this," he admitted. "What if she wants to come back into Sophie's life?" "Then we'll deal with it together," Brielle said. "Whatever it says, we'll figure it out as a family." Julian opened the letter. As he read it, his expression changed from apprehension to surprise to something like sadness. "What does it say?" Brielle asked gently. "She's writing to say goodbye," Julian said. "She's getting remarried to that artist she left us for. They're moving to Australia permanently. She wanted me to know that she's officially and permanently relinquishing all parental rights. She hopes Sophie is happy and well, but she doesn't want any contact. She says it's better for everyone if she stays out of our lives completely." "Oh," Brielle said softly. "How do you feel about that?" "Relieved, honestly," Julian admitted. "Is that terrible? She's Sophie's biological mother, and I'm relieved she's not trying to come back into our lives." "It's not terrible," Brielle assured him. "It's realistic. Amanda made her choice a long time ago. This is just making it official." "Should we tell Sophie?" Julian asked. "I think we should," Brielle said. "But gently and only the basics. Let her know that her biological mother is moving far away and won't be in contact, but that she has a mother right here who loves her completely." They told Sophie that evening, both of them sitting with her in her room. Sophie listened carefully, her expression hard to read. "So Amanda is never coming back?" Sophie asked. "Never?" "It doesn't look like it," Julian said. "How do you feel about that?" Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I used to think about her a lot. Wonder why she left me, if I did something wrong, if maybe she would come back someday. But I don't think about her as much anymore." "Why is that?" Brielle asked gently. "Because I have you now," Sophie said, looking at Brielle. "You're my real mom. Not the one who gave birth to me, but the one who's here. The one who makes me lunch and helps with my homework and tucks me in at night. The one who showed up and stayed." Brielle pulled Sophie into a hug, her eyes filling with tears. "I will always be here for you, sweetheart. Always. That's a promise." "I know," Sophie said. Then, after a moment, "Is it okay if I don't miss Amanda? Is it okay if I'm just happy with our family the way it is?" "That's completely okay," Julian assured her. "You get to feel however you feel. There's no right or wrong way to process this." Sophie nodded. Then she smiled. "Can Brandon and I go play now? We were in the middle of building a fort." "Of course," Brielle said, amazed at the resilience of this child. After Sophie left, Julian turned to Brielle. "She really is okay, isn't she?" "She's healed." "She has," Brielle confirmed. Because she has love and stability and a family that shows up for her every day. That's all she ever needed. The months that followed were filled with joy. Brandon started 5th grade and joined the soccer team, with Julian attending every single game. Sophie thrived in 3rd grade, making new friends and growing more confident every day. The family took weekend trips to the beach, had movie nights, celebrated holidays together. And then, on a chilly November evening, Brielle made a discovery that would add another chapter to their story. She was late. Very late. She took a pregnancy test in the upstairs bathroom, her hands shaking. When it showed positive, she sat on the edge of the bathtub for a long time, processing the news. She was pregnant. At 34 years old, married to Julian for only 5 months, she was going to have a baby. Their baby. That evening, after the kids were asleep, she told Julian. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up and spun her around, then immediately put her down gently as if she might break. Sorry, he said, his hands hovering protectively. Should I not have done that? Are you okay? Brielle laughed. I'm pregnant, not made of glass. But yes, I'm okay. More than okay. I'm happy. Are you happy? Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Julian said, his eyes shining. We're having a baby. A baby that's ours together. Oh, Brielle, this is amazing. They decided to wait a few weeks before telling the children, wanting to make sure everything was progressing well. But keeping the secret proved difficult, especially when Brielle started feeling queasy in the mornings. Finally, at 12 weeks, they gathered Sophie and Brandon for a family meeting. We have some news, Julian began. Something exciting. You're getting a dog? Brandon guessed hopefully. Better than a dog, Brielle said with a smile. You're both going to be big brother and big sister. To a new baby. I'm pregnant. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Sophie shrieked with delight and threw her arms around Brielle. A baby? A real baby? That's ours. A real baby that's ours, Brielle confirmed. Brandon looked thoughtful. So we're really a family now. Not just because of the wedding, but because there's a baby that has all of us as family. Exactly, Julian said, pulling Brandon into a hug. How do you feel about that? It's cool, Brandon said, trying to sound casual but unable to hide his smile. I guess I can help teach the baby stuff. Like how to play games and do homework and things like that. We'll all help, Sophie said. This is the best news ever. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. As Brielle's belly grew, so did the family's excitement. Sophie and Brandon would put their hands on her stomach to feel the baby kick. Julian read parenting books and baby-proofed the house. They converted one of the spare rooms into a nursery, painting it a cheerful yellow since they had decided not to find out the baby's gender. On a warm day in June, exactly 1 year after Brielle and Julian's wedding, Brielle went into labor. Julian drove her to the hospital while Sophie and Brandon stayed home with Maggie, anxiously awaiting news. After 10 hours of labor, Brielle and Julian welcomed a healthy baby girl into the world. They named her Hope. Hope Janelle Parker, with Janelle being Brielle's mother's name. She had a head full of dark curly hair, brown eyes that would eventually lighten, and the most perfect tiny features. When Julian held his newborn daughter for the first time, tears streamed down his face. She's perfect. Absolutely perfect. She really is, Brielle agreed, exhausted but glowing. They brought Hope home 2 days later to meet her big brother and sister. Sophie and Brandon were enchanted, taking turns gently holding the baby and marveling at her tiny fingers and toes. She's so small, Sophie whispered in awe. Were we ever this small? You were, Julian confirmed. And now look how big you've gotten. Hope will grow up just like you did. And we'll be here to help her, Brandon said seriously. Like real big siblings. Over the next few months, their family of 5 found its rhythm. Late-night feedings, diaper changes, the exhaustion of new parenthood. But also the incredible joy of watching Hope grow, seeing her first smile, hearing her first laugh. Sophie and Brandon were amazing with their baby sister. They would entertain her when Brielle needed a break, help with simple tasks and shower her with love. One evening, when Hope was 4 months old, the family was gathered in the living room. Hope was in Brielle's arms, Sophie and Brandon were playing a board game on the floor, and Julian was reading nearby. It was an ordinary moment, nothing special. But as Brielle looked around the room, she was overwhelmed with gratitude. This was her family. Her husband, her 3 children, her home, her life. It had all started with finding a lost little girl by the side of a highway. That moment of choosing kindness, choosing to help, had led to this. A beautiful, messy, joyful family built on love and second chances. What are you thinking about? Julian asked, noticing her emotional expression. Just how lucky I am, Brielle replied. How lucky we all are. Julian set down his book and came to sit beside her. He put his arm around her shoulders, careful not to disturb Hope, who was dozing. I'm the lucky one, he said. You took a broken man and a wounded child and helped us heal. You built a family from pieces that didn't seem like they would fit together. We built it together, Brielle corrected. All of us. Sophie looked up from the game. Can we take a family photo? I want to remember this. Of course, Julian said, pulling out his phone. They gathered together on the couch, Julian and Brielle in the center with baby Hope, Sophie on Brielle's other side and Brandon next to Julian. They set the phone on a tripod timer and arranged themselves, smiling at the camera. But just before the photo snapped, Sophie said, "Wait, say it together. Our family motto." It was something they had started a few months ago, a simple phrase that represented their values. As the camera counted down, all 5 of them said in unison, "Kindness, hope, and love." The photo captured a moment of pure happiness, a family that had been built from unexpected circumstances, held together by choice and commitment and an abundance of love. That photo would be framed and placed on the mantle, a reminder of how far they had all come and how beautiful life could be when you opened your heart to the possibilities. 3 years later, Brandon was 12 and preparing for middle school. Sophie was 10 and confident and creative. Hope was a rambunctious 3-year-old who kept everyone on their toes. Julian had successfully balanced his business with his family life, proving that you could be both a CEO and a present father. And Brielle had gone back to school, earning her teaching credential and accepting a position at Sophie's school as a second-grade teacher. Life was full and busy and sometimes chaotic. But it was also filled with love and laughter and the deep satisfaction of having built something meaningful together. One evening, as Brielle tucked Hope into bed, the little girl said, "Mama, tell me the story again. About how we became a family." Brielle smiled. This had become Hope's favorite bedtime story. "Well," Brielle began, "it all started when I found a little girl who was lost and scared. I didn't know it then, but finding her would change my whole life." "That was Sophie," Hope said. "My big sister." "That's right. I helped Sophie get home to her daddy, and her daddy asked me to help them become a real family again." "And you did," Hope said proudly. "You fixed everything." "Not just me," Brielle corrected gently. "We all fixed it together." Sophie was brave enough to tell her daddy how she felt. Her daddy worked hard to be a better father. Brandon welcomed Sophie like a sister right away. "And I did my best to help everyone see how much they loved each other. And then you and Daddy got married and then I was born," Hope finished the story. "And we all lived happily ever after." "We all lived happily ever after," Brielle confirmed, kissing her daughter's forehead. "And we still are." As she left Hope's room and walked down the hallway of the home she shared with Julian and their children, Brielle thought about how true that statement was. They really were living happily ever after, not in the fairy tale sense where everything was perfect, but in the real sense where they chose love and kindness every day, where they showed up for each other through good times and hard times, where they had built something lasting and true. She found Julian in their bedroom reading over some papers for work. "Hope wanted the family story again," Brielle said, climbing into bed beside him. Julian smiled and set his papers aside. "She never gets tired of it." "Neither do I," Brielle admitted. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life." "Our life," Julian corrected, pulling her close. "And I thank God every day that you found Sophie. That you chose to help her. That you gave us all a second chance." "I think we gave each other a second chance," Brielle said. "All of us." They lay together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their home. Sophie practicing piano downstairs, Brandon's video game sounds coming from his room, Hope's soft breathing from down the hall. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found Sophie that day?" Julian asked. "If you had taken a different route home or if someone else had found her first?" "Sometimes," Brielle admitted. "But I try not to think about it too much. I believe things happen the way they're supposed to. I was meant to find Sophie. We were meant to become a family. Kindness, hope, and love," Julian said, quoting their family motto. "That's what brought us together. And that's what will keep us together," Brielle added. As they drifted off to sleep, Brielle felt a deep contentment. She had started with so little, a small apartment, a tight budget, working 2 jobs to provide for Brandon. But she had never lost her kindness, her hope, or her capacity to love. And in the end, those were the things that mattered most. Those were the things that had built this beautiful life. The story that had begun with a lost child by a highway had led to finding something even more precious. A family bound not by obligation or blood, but by choice. Every day they chose each other. Every day they chose love. And that was the happiest ending of all.